listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Domestic and family violence has become the focal point of heated debates, news headlines and fierce campaigns across the country, with advocates pushing to change laws and speak out for victims and survivors. But some experts are concerned there's a portion of them being forgotten, whose deaths are often underreported and even minimised.
There was this soft reporting around the incident of female filicide versus the male filicide. Why are we doing that? These victims deserve to be treated equitably. It doesn't matter what gender's killing the kids are being killed.
That chat with a former detective and criminology expert is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Cassidy. It's Monday the 13th of October.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're starting in the Middle East where it's expected all living Israeli hostages held by Hamas will be released, and we'll meet with US President Donald Trump, who's set to touch down in the region later today. It's expected the 20 Israeli hostages will be choppered out of Gaza and reunited with their families at some stage today, with hospitals in Tel Aviv currently preparing for their arrival. In exchange, around 250 Palestinians serving lengthy sentences in Israeli prisons will be freed, many of them expected to be deported to Egypt, while around 1,700 Palestinians detained in the wake of October 7, most without charge, will be allowed to return to whatever is left of their homes.
It comes as the ceasefire appears to hold, with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returning to neighbourhoods in the north of Gaza, where Israeli troops have started to withdraw, with local authorities finding dozens of bodies buried under the rubble of buildings demolished in Israeli strikes. And that, Tari, is all unfolding while aid is beginning to flow in. So we've seen hundreds of Gazans now lining up at border crossings to collect, necessary food and medicine. And as all of this continued to develop over the weekend, back home we saw tens of thousands joining pro-Palestine rallies right across the country.
2 years of contraction of hope, 2 years of mass destruction.
In Sydney, police estimated a crowd of 8,000 showed up, while organisers say more than 10,000 did. Among them was Abu Bakr Rafiq, one of several Australian activists part of the global flotilla intercepted and detained by Israeli forces, who alleges he was kicked, slapped and humiliated in custody, all claims the IDF denies.
And they did this with the goal that I will come home and I will remain silent. But to those IDF soldiers, look now, we will never be silent!
Meanwhile, in Melbourne, just under 4,000 people gathered and marched from the CBD towards the US consulate, with Senator Lydia Thorpe among those addressing the crowd.
So we stand with you every day, and if I have to burn down Parliament House to make a point, I am not there to make friends. I'm there to get justice for our people.
Now, those comments have since been called out by federal opposition Senate leader Michaelia Cash, who's labelled them disgraceful and shocking, but also unsurprising, saying the coalition would be considering options available within the Senate to hold her accountable.
There are fresh calls for state and territories flailing behind to review their pill testing laws after a second nitazene death just weeks ahead of annual end-of-school celebrations. Last week, it was confirmed a second person had consumed the highly potent synthetic opioid after eating a pale yellow teddy bear-shaped pill with a Y on it, with the matter coming to light as part of a coronial investigation. Nitazenes work like heroin or fentanyl, but can be life-threatening in very small amounts and have been known to cause obstructed breathing and respiratory failure, leading to death and comas.
Yeah, and this latest reported fatality comes only weeks after the Queensland government actually passed laws banning pill testing services, instead deciding to issue a health alert, which experts have just labelled as too little too late. They're calling for all states and territories to urgently allow and introduce pill testing sites, particularly at events like festivals and end-of-school celebrations like schoolies, which are set to kick off around the country in just a few weeks' time in mid-November. Now, these advocates are saying they're concerned that nitazenes, which have knowingly been circulating in Australia since at least the start of the year, could likely be found at schoolies events, with young people thinking they're taking like MDMA or cocaine.
Now, in terms of where allows pill testing and where doesn't, currently New South Wales has commenced a 12-month trial allowing mobile pill testing at music festivals. Victoria has fixed and mobile pill testing services, with the practice also available in the ACT since 2022. But WA, South Australia, the Northern Territory and Tasmania are yet to introduce any kind of services, while Queensland had sites before banning the practice in recent weeks after the state government changed hands to the LNP, citing concerns that it encourages the behaviour.
Yeah, and look, in terms of pill testing, it's not something that's new. It's been available in places like Europe since the 1990s, Chris, and in fact there's 28 countries that have it around the world, Europe, the Americas, New Zealand, and we do know, speaking to experts, it is something that's been proven to be effective for those who do engage in the services. And seeing as we know, according to the stats, 3.4 million Aussies have used some kind of drug in the past 12 months, and the rates are rising. This isn't an issue that's going to be going away.
Millions of Aussies are being warned to not fall for any fake Qantas compensation scams after a hacker group leaked 5.7 million of its customers' data on the dark web. The airline had been among nearly 40 other global companies hit with a ransom demand by hacker collective Scattered Lapsus Hunters last week, with both customer and employee details leaked after payment wasn't made over the weekend.
Yeah, and we have since heard from Qantas, who says most of the info leaked was limited to names, email addresses and frequent flyers. Some others relating to date of birth, mobile numbers and genders, but no payment details just yet. Now, it says it's continuing to investigate dark web channels to figure out exactly what has been leaked, and it's working with the federal government and the AFP.
Yeah, and speaking of the federal government, it's maintaining its position that it will not negotiate with cyber criminals or pay ransoms after it was called out by the hacker group on Saturday, who threatened the government with endless attacks until it changes its laws and policies. So the advice for anyone at the moment who might be impacted, Qantas does have a 24-hour line that you can contact, but the advice at the moment is to change your passwords, enable two-factor verification where possible, and never click on links in emails from unknown sources.
It's been a horror weekend for youth and knife crime in Australia after 2 attacks in Sydney and Melbourne left 3 people hospitalised. Yesterday afternoon, a 14-year-old boy was slashed in the chest while boarding a train in Sydney's northwest at Hornsby Station. Police allege he was attacked by another 14-year-old who was with 3 others before the trio fled the scene. Now, officers are calling for any witnesses of that attack to come forward, but they're yet to make any arrests.
Meantime, in Melbourne, a father and son were attacked in the early hours of Sunday morning in an alleged stabbing by a group of youths while walking on the Yarra Promenade. According to police, the pair bumped into the group and a verbal altercation broke out, resulting in the assault before the teens fled the scene. Both the 47-year-old man and his 23-year-old son were taken to hospital and are now in stable conditions.
Now, since these attacks, the Victorian opposition leader Brad Batten has come out and said that more does need to be done to try and crack down on this growing issue of youth and knife crime.
Do we have to see someone die in a shopping centre to ensure that we can get the policies and the legislative changes we need to keep Victorians safe?
Meanwhile, Labor MP Steve Dimopoulos says the government is taking it seriously.
This is why we're making those big investments in the efforts to machete ban. And this is important, and I think we'll see improvement over time.
Now, in terms of this latest Melbourne stabbing, police did later arrest 5 teens. 3 of those were charged and 2 were released on bail pending future court dates in the Children's Court.
And move over Broncos and Storm. There's a new chief in town. The NRL's officially unveiled the new name of its 19th NRL franchise, the Papua New Guinea Chiefs. After months of back and forth, Australia and Papua New Guinea's governments have put pen to paper and announced the new team at a meeting in Port Moresby yesterday, the same weekend that Australia took out Port Moresby in their annual Prime Minister's 13 Rugby League clash.
Yeah, that's right. And the PNG PMs announced that it's finally decided on the name of its new side. And it was because they said before there was a Prime Minister, Chris, before there was a King or Queen in England, the head within tribes was the chief. So they feel this name is a great choice and it's authentic and rich in PNG's cultural identity. And this team's set to join the NRL ranks by 2028. And if you hear what the runner-up name was, it was the Pythons, and I think Chiefs is way better, so I reckon this was a good pick.
Yes, and as someone who absolutely hates snakes and spiders, Tara Cassidy, I welcome this one as well. Now, look, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is your deep dive, Tara, looking at a lesser-spoken form of domestic and family violence. It involves kids and why experts say they're being forgotten. Have a listen to that up next.
Every year, there are dozens of domestic and family violence homicides in Australia involving children and their parents. Earlier this month, an anaesthetist killed her 8-year-old daughter in a murder-suicide in Brisbane. In May, a 3-year-old girl was stabbed to death by her mother at their home north of Bundaberg, while a 20-year-old was charged with murdering his 10-week-old baby girl in central Queensland in January. They're among the 5 known alleged filicide cases this year. Meanwhile, there's also been other murders where the kids have been the offenders. In 2 separate incidents in Victoria this year, teenagers were arrested for allegedly stabbing their mothers to death. And just last month, a 31-year-old man was arrested for the murders of his parents, who were found dead inside a takeaway shop in Sydney's west. The cases are always horrific and equally devastating, yet despite there being dozens in Australia each year, we know little about this type of offending and what drives it, an issue some experts say needs to change. One of them is former police detective inspector turned Bondi Uni criminologist, Dr. Terry Goldsworthy. Terry, welcome back to the briefing. Can you start by explaining a bit about what filicide is and what insights we do have into this kind of offence in Australia?
Yeah, so filicide is one of the 4 domestic homicide types that we look at in Australia. So the 4 types are intimate partner violence, wife kills husband, husband kills wife, that type of stuff. Then we have filicide, which is killing of your children by the parent. We have siblicide, which is the killing of brother and sisters. And then we have parricide, which is the killing of your parents. So they are the 4 types that go towards making up domestic violence homicides in Australia. As we know, intimate partner violence, I think somewhere roughly around 75% of the offenders are male, 25% female, and the same for victims roughly. Filicide is a different nature because the offending is essentially on a par between male and females. So since 2001, some data that I obtained from the National Homicide Monitoring Project shows that, 52% of offenders were male and 48% were female. So it's a different type of offence in terms of it's gender neutral. We hear a lot of talk about gender-based violence, etc. This is probably an exception to that rule. The other thing, I guess, about filicide is it doesn't often get the exposure that we see from intimate partner homicides, and that's probably simply due to the fact the numbers are much smaller. But nonetheless, I think it's an important area to look at, and hence the reason we're here today talking about it, because these victims are especially vulnerable and they don't have a voice as such. They're young children when they're killed by their parents, and I think many of us struggle to understand why a parent or how a parent could actually kill their own child.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd said that recent cases in Australia, there'd been a few cases of mothers allegedly killing their children, and that you felt that that had exposed some kind of uncomfortable truth when it came to domestic violence. Can you tell me what you meant by that?
We're more prepared to accept violence from males, and that's based on what we've seen in intimate partner violence and things like that. Most assaults committed by men. I think when we see women, mothers killing their children, it's very hard for us to deal with. We have that kind of, ideology where, maternalistic mother won't do that kind of action to their child. But the facts tell us that, the data says that women will do it just as regularly as men. And I think that is a truth that is uncomfortable in terms of people, don't want to think that mothers would be capable of that same kind of horrendous action. And, they do kill in different ways. I guess you could say the gentler touch of killing. Women may not be as violent in the way they kill, but they're still killing. It may be through smothering or, suffocation, choking, rather than, stabbing or beating to death or something like that. So there is some variance in how it's done, but nonetheless, the outcome is the same. There's some soft reporting around it at times, often described as tragic, and, there's an immediate kind of rush to provide an explanation as to why this happened, that you don't necessarily see when a man or a father goes and kills their child. And, if you look through the media anecdotally, there was a couple of cases in Victoria which were quite interesting. They were almost identical in terms of the method of killing. So you had a father drive his 3 kids into a dam and they drowned and died, and he's subsequently been tried a number of times for murder. You then had a lady drive her car into a park lake and 3 children died. And the reporting around that was very varied in the way that it was approached. It was the same event, the same outcome in absolute terms. But there was this, soft reporting around the incident of female filicide versus the male filicide. And, that to me, I go, well, why are we doing that? These victims deserve to be treated equitably. It doesn't matter what gender's killing the kids are being killed. I think we should be careful of attempting to minimise or explain away, one form of filicide versus another. I mean, if there's a reasonable explanation in terms of a legal defence, that being insanity, which is a full defence to murder in Queensland, then by all means, let's put that out there and the legal process will be taking place. But, just because someone's depressed doesn't mean they're insane. It doesn't mean they're not criminally responsible.
I know what you're talking about. I did see a couple of cases only in recent weeks where that kind of language was used, just here in Queensland. Now, separately, you mentioned parricide a little bit earlier. There was some research that came out just in the last week talking about parricide and the act of a child killing their parent. What can you tell us about that kind of crime?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It's come out from the OIC off the same program I just talked about before. About 5% of homicides are parricide, so small numbers. But what they tell us is that it's committed overwhelmingly by male offenders, and generally it's gendered in terms of the males will kill their fathers and females will kill their mothers. Knives seemingly the weapon of choice for parricide, as it is in, general homicides as well. So, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, small numbers. We do see the occasional offence where a parent is killed. I can remember in my time in the police down here in charge of the criminal investigation branch in the Gold Coast, we did have 2 cases that actually, I think back about it now, we had a son who stabbed his father to death. He'd been using marijuana heavily for some time and killed him. And then we had a son who killed his mother, and we never found her remains, but he was charged and subsequently convicted of murder. And his motivation was he changed the will to get the unit, etc. recently. He then spent several weeks before he reported her missing, and we had a good circumstantial case, and he's still in jail today. And
earlier in an article that you'd written when you were talking about filicide, you described some of the victims as forgotten victims in the way that perhaps we don't report on them in the same magnitude because, like you said, perhaps they're smaller numbers. What do you think needs to change when having these discussions about these types of domestic and family violence crimes, whether it be filicide or parricide?
Well, I think we need to, I remember I was asked a question on a radio program once about domestic violence homicides, and I gave a breakdown of gender in terms of the offenders. And after I got off the air, I was contacted by a victim support service director, and she said to me, "Where did you get those figures from?" And I said, "Well, I got them from the Australian Institute of Criminology." I said, "It's in their report." And she goes, "Well, that figure's far too low. Because you have those other 4 categories, it lowers the amount of male offenders versus female." And, I was subsequently told off saying that we only usually refer to intimate partner violent offences. And I said, "Well, why would you do that?" I said, "They're all domestic violence offences." And that is, I guess, when it dawned on me that we're not talking about the other categories. We just focus a lot on intimate partner violence and those offences that derive from that. And I can understand that in terms of numbers. But there are whole cohorts of victims out there that we are not really focusing on. I mean, they get some mention and then, we move on very quickly. There's no sustained focus or attention on these other cohorts. And it was good to see that the AIC has released that report on parricide. I mean, it is a small number of offences, but nonetheless, these people are getting killed by their own sons and daughters. We need to look at these type of offences, and I think when we talk about domestic violence offences in terms of homicides, etc., we should always be talking about, remembering there's 4 categories. There's not just one, there's 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think perhaps it doesn't mean we can't be talking about, say, intimate partner violence as much as we are, but just making sure that we're not forgetting the other victims, like you said. Terry, I really appreciate your time on the briefing today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Tara.
That was Dr. Terry Goldsworthy speaking with me there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.